He doesn't cast safe, and he doesn't cast by numbers. Quentin Tarantino casts like a gunslinger, quick, instinctive, and deadly precise. Once you're in, you're part of the myth. For over 30 years, Tarantino has rewritten the rules of cinema. Dialogue-driven, ultra-stylized, blood-soaked, and hyper-specific. But behind the chaos, there's something most people miss: loyalty. Once he finds someone who understands his rhythm, his madness, his structure, he brings them back again and again. Not because they're stars, but because they're wired to his wavelength. And once he finds that, you're not cast, you're carved in. Pulp Fiction, Kill Bill, Inglourious Bastard, Django Unchained. His films may jump genres, but one thread never changes: the actors he trusts. He doesn't write for them. He constructs worlds in their voice. Tarantino doesn't cast roles. He casts to blow them up. When you see it on screen, you're not observing performance. You're watching possession. He's had dozens, but few converse his cinematic language with ease. Actors who challenge him, inspire him, push him, and in some way keep up. Number 1, Samuel L. Jackson. Some pairings don't begin with a handshake. They begin with a monologue. When Jackson arrived to read for Pulp Fiction, Tarantino didn't merely discover an actor. He discovered a voice he'd never heard before, but immediately knew. Jules Winfield wasn't hired. He was staked. Jackson has said, "I didn't audition. I claimed that role like it was written in my blood." From that moment, Tarantino stopped writing for characters and started writing for Jackson. His rhythm, his authority, his fire, no one else had it. In Jackie Brown, he made menace look like charm. In Django Unchained, he redefined power and fear. Tarantino once declared, "If I give Sam the phone book, he'll make it Shakespeare." By The Hateful Eight, Jackson was not being hired. He was being brought back in. Tarantino provided him with the film's rhythm, and Jackson provided it with mastery. When he recites those monologues, his eyes not even blinking, voice barely above a whisper, you're seeing no performance. You're seeing power. Tarantino once described him as, "He's my De Niro, my Eastwood, my everything." Jackson isn't a visitor to Tarantino's universe. He's the foundation it was built on. Number 2, Uma Thurman. Some filmmakers construct characters. Tarantino constructed a myth, and he constructed it around her. Thurman didn't merely appear in Kill Bill. She became its template, the Avenger, the Mother, the Blade. But it started 10 years ago with Pulp Fiction, when Mia Wallace glided into pop culture history with a glance and a cigarette. The wig, the quiet, the threat. Tarantino didn't direct her. He trusted her. "There's something about Uma," he said. "She gets the rhythm of my words before I even finish writing them." That faith influenced his script. When he scripted Kill Bill, he didn't cast her, he called her. The bride wasn't constructed for an actress. She was constructed for Uma. Their romance wasn't easy. The Kill Bill car crash almost killed them both. But they didn't part ways. Thurman explained later, "Quentin and I have our problems, but we have our love as well." And that love became film. All the things Tarantino had to say regarding pain, motherhood, justice, and anger. How he expressed them through her. Even when they parted ways, he never remade or replaced her. For you don't revise mythology. You hold out for the next installment. Number 3, Leonardo DiCaprio. When Tarantino hired Leo, he wasn't hiring an actor. He was equipping himself with an arsenal. DiCaprio had already done politics and prestige, but Tarantino gave him something more sinister, a bleeding villain. In Django Unchained, Leo portrayed Calvin Candy, a southern beau decaying internally. And when he broke that glass and actually bled on camera, he didn't stop. Tarantino called cut only when the scene was finished. That moment heralded their trust. DiCaprio didn't portray Candy as a monster. He portrayed him as a man who thought he was good, and that was even more frightening. Years later, in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Tarantino summoned Leo again, not for a character, but for a legacy. Rick Dalton wasn't created for anybody else. It was Leo or nothing. The outcome wasn't explosive, it was human, vulnerable, sad. Tarantino cleared space for grace, and Leo filled it. When Leo works, Tarantino explained, he brings everything: talent, history, weight. That level of extraordinary doesn't get cast. It gets written in. Number 4. Christoph Waltz. When Quentin Tarantino discovered Christoph Waltz, it wasn't a discovery. It was a detonation. Waltz was practically unknown outside of Europe prior to *Inglourious Bastard, a well-respected television veteran. Talented, but underappreciated. Then Tarantino gave him Hans Landa, grinning, frightening, eloquent beyond words, and everything shifted. Tarantino did not simply provide him with the villain. He provided him with the movie. The character was written as nearly impossible to play. Too smart, too loquacious, too much. Tarantino was prepared to scrap the script altogether until Waltz showed up in the room. "If I couldn't find Landa, the movie was dead," Tarantino said. "Then Christoph came in and rescued my movie." And so he did. In the first scene, milk, cigarettes, gentle smiles, and death lurking behind every syllable. Waltz didn't act Landa. He feasted on him. He spewed monologues like a man serving poison honey to an audience too dazed to do otherwise. Tarantino gave him pages of dialogue that most actors would have pleaded to cut. Waltz didn't edit, he doubled. He discovered rhythm out of rhythm, meaning out of sound. For the first time, Tarantino didn't have to coordinate the energy. He simply had to preserve it. The outcome was an Oscar and global acclaim for a performance so complex that it belonged to both charm and terror. Tarantino wasn't finished. 2 years later came Django Unchained and Dr. King Schultz, a bounty hunter, a gentleman, a moral compass in a brutal world. He wrote it for one guy. After Bastard, he explained, "I knew that Christoph could do anything, so I gave him the opposite." Waltz performed again, only this time with warmth and humanity. Still a stand-up operator, still cutting, as always, but warm. That dichotomy didn't weaken his genius, it enriched it. Because Tarantino isn't fixated on voice, he's fixated on duality. And Waltz is one of the few actors who can balance both sides of the ledger without tipping over. Charming without ever smiling, lethal without ever using a raised voice, intelligent without ever seeming remote. That's why Tarantino didn't merely use him. He created room for him, page after page of dialogue and emotional complexity. Not out of necessity, but because he could. Waltz made the impossible easy. Tarantino himself said once, "I had to bring him back." And even after 2 masterpieces with him, he never overused him. No cameos, no throwaways. Because Waltz is not a tool, he's an instrument. And when you listen to something that's sharp, that rare, that clear, you don't play it every time. You wait until the silence calls for a voice like his. Number 5. Kurt Russell. Quentin Tarantino doesn't work with nostalgia. He works with memory. And Kurt Russell is the memory he never lost. From grindhouse films to 80s antiheroes, Russell was a type of masculinity that didn't have to yell. He wasn't loud or smooth, he just showed up. Tarantino grew up watching him, studying the way that he balanced silence, swagger, and mayhem in equal proportions. So when he finally had the opportunity, Tarantino didn't cast Russell as a marketing gimmick. He hired him as a ghost from another time, brought back to reign over a new one. In Death Proof, Russell did not burst onto the screen. He oozed into it. As Stuntman Mike, he was both charming and pathetic, threatening and sad. Tarantino explained, "There's a sadness in Kurt's eyes you can't direct. You either have it or you don't." That sadness served the character. Russell brought not menace, he brought regret, a diminished legend attempting to redefine his legend one crash at a time. Their relationship grew with the Hateful Eight. Tarantino required someone to ground a room of killers, not in fury, but in presence. He required the hangman. Russell did not audition. He simply showed up. His gravitas occupied the space. "Kurt brings a weight a history," Tarantino said. "Each film he's ever done is somehow present in his silences." He isn't flashy, and precisely for that reason, he belongs. Tarantino's worlds live on chaos, blood, and monologues. But when Russell shows up, the storm stops. He keeps it suspended just long enough to remind you that there's some humanity behind the madness. That doesn't happen often. That rarely happens that Tarantino used him again in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. The role was minor, a stunt coordinator, a voiceover, a fleeting presence. But Russell made it count. One scene, one voiceover, and the movie felt rooted. Because when Tarantino deploys Kurt Russell, he's not really casting a guy. He's calling up a period. And that sort of presence, you don't ever overuse, you respect. Number 6, Michael Madsen. Some performers are visitors in Tarantino's world. Michael Madsen was already there when it wasn't even constructed yet. When Reservoir Dogs opened in 1992, it didn't just introduce a director. It introduced a relationship based on trust. Tarantino cast Madsen in the role of Mr. Blonde, a character so violent and charged with electricity that most actors would have gone big. But Madsen didn't. He underplayed it, slower, quieter, infinitely more sinister. Most guys would have screamed, Tarantino said. Mike whispered. That's why it worked. The legend of the ear-cutting scene grew not for the gore, but for the tranquility, the rhythm, how Madsen could make you want to turn your head before even a thing had occurred. Tarantino noticed that and recognized this was no fluke. He considered Madsen family. From Kill Bill through The Hateful Eight, Madsen was part of Tarantino's emotional topography. He never craved the limelight. He provided stillness, danger packaged in quiet. Madsen wasn't asked to be given more screen space. He worked himself in. Tarantino crafted scenes around Madsen's timing, his silence, his waiting. In The Hateful Eight, there's one line that, effectively, changes the tone of the entire film. Tarantino didn't embellish it. He left it to the weight. Mike makes silence feel like dialogue, he explained. Their collaboration isn't loud or showy. It's honest, substantial, grounded in respect. When Once Upon a Time in Hollywood rolled around, Madsen's role was small once more, but intentional. It wasn't about legacy, it was about continuity. There are some guys who are always right for the frame. Mike's one of those guys, Tarantino said. No awards, no headlines, just consistency. And consistency is the highest compliment in Tarantino's universe. Some actors fade, some lose their timing. But Michael Madsen? He's still in the room, still dangerous, still crucial. Because Quentin Tarantino doesn't select actors. He takes them in through the manner in which he delivers stories. Once he finds someone who is a fit, who gets the rhythm, the silence, the madness, he doesn't look elsewhere. He comes back again and again until their presence is incorporated into his vocabulary. The actors here did not audition into his universe. They achieved it by becoming something greater than actors. They became his voice.